Finally, Treasure Link is here, and I genuinely don't know whether to call this one of the biggest disappointments of the year, or one of Konami's strangest decisions in recent memory. Ever since this event was announced, the community has been building expectations because that's what Treasure Link usually does. It's one of those events where people start dreaming about free endgame epics, broken cards, double boosters, and maybe even a surprise pay-to-win skill or two. After everything Konami has been releasing over the last few months, it honestly felt impossible for Treasure Link to disappoint. Then the cards were revealed, and the entire mood changed almost instantly. I'm not even exaggerating when I say I thought I was looking at old screenshots. I actually had to double-check the announcement because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 5 single-booster epic cards in late eFootball 2026, with eFootball 2027 almost here. It honestly felt like Konami walked into a storage room, dusted off a folder labeled 2024, and decided to release it anyway. That's because the last time we saw single-booster epic cards was back in 2024. And ever since then, the game has evolved so much that seeing them return now just feels weird. The 5 players we've been given are Rio Ferdinand, Carles Puyol, Marco van Basten, Wesley Sneijder, and John Koller. On paper, that's an incredible lineup. Treasure Link isn't something you finish in 5 minutes. You're going to spend days grinding for these rewards, so before you invest all that time, we need to know if these cards are actually worth it, or whether you're better off collecting the tokens, skill trainers, and everything else instead. After spending time looking through every single card, I came away with one conclusion that honestly surprised me. Out of the 5 players Konami gave us, only one immediately looked like someone I'd confidently put into a Division 1 squad, and that's Rio Ferdinand. The biggest reason isn't even his overall rating. It's the fact that he's the only player in this Treasure Link with a pay-to-win skill, Aerial Fort. That immediately separates him from everyone else because that skill alone makes him much more valuable. Winning aerial duels has become so important in eFootball, especially against players who constantly spam lofted passes and crosses, so giving Rio Aerial Fort instantly makes him feel like the headline player of this event. Then you start looking at the rest of his card and things get even better. He has 95 defensive awareness, 95 tackling, 94 defensive engagement, 96 aggression, 94 physical contact, 94 jump, and 93 heading. Add all of that to a 192 centimeter player model, and you've got exactly the type of defender that people love using online. Rio has always had those long interception animations that somehow allow him to win balls nobody else can reach, and that's something statistics alone can never fully explain. If you've ever used an epic Rio Ferdinand before, you already know how annoying he can be to play against because his player ID does a lot of the work for him. But just when I started thinking Konami had finally cooked something special, I looked at his pace. 83 speed and 79 acceleration. And I immediately understood what this Treasure Link was going to be about. Those numbers aren't terrible. If this exact card had been released 2 years ago, people would have been calling him one of the best defenders in the game. The problem is that we're no longer playing eFootball 2024. We're almost entering eFootball 2027, where defenders are expected to recover like sprinters and chase down the fastest attackers in football. Compared to the defenders we've been getting recently, Rio simply feels slower than expected. He's still the best card in this Treasure Link, but at the same time, you can't help feeling Konami intentionally held him back from becoming truly overpowered. As I kept going through the rest of the cards, I realized Rio wasn't the exception. He was actually the pattern. The next card is Carles Puyol, and I think he's going to split opinions more than anybody else here. Defensively, this card is absolutely ridiculous. 100 tackling, 99 defensive engagement, 99 aggression, 94 defensive awareness, 98 jump, and 93 physical contact. If football was only about defending one-on-one situations, Puyol would probably be the best defender in this treasure link. He looks like the kind of player that's going to throw himself into every challenge, bully attackers off the ball, and make every tackle look personal. The problem is that modern eFootball isn't only about defending anymore. It's about recovering after mistakes, dealing with through-ball spam, and matching the pace of ridiculously fast forwards. That's where Puyol starts showing his age. At 178 centimeters, he isn't the tallest center back, and unlike Rio Ferdinand, he doesn't have aerial fort to compensate for it. Then you notice his pace sits at just 81 speed and 82 acceleration. Once again, those aren't horrible numbers, but they're definitely below what we've become used to seeing from elite defenders. Against slower strikers, he'll be brilliant, but once Mbappé, Vinicius, or another rapid forward starts making runs behind him, you're probably going to notice those missing few points of speed. That's what makes this treasure link so frustrating. None of these cards are bad. In fact, they're all genuinely good footballers with strong statistics in the areas they're supposed to dominate. The issue is that Konami has spent the last year raising the standards so much that good no longer feels good enough. We've been spoiled by double boosters, insane player IDs, and ridiculous pay-to-win skills, so releasing cards like these now almost feels like taking a step backwards. Then comes Marco van Basten, and I honestly think he's the perfect example of this entire treasure link. His attacking stats are excellent. 97 finishing, 96 offensive awareness, 91 ball control, 89 speed, and 90 acceleration. Put him inside the box and he'll score goals all day long. His movement is intelligent, his finishing is clinical, and he's exactly what you'd expect from one of the greatest strikers football has ever seen. But here's the question I kept asking myself while looking at his card. What makes him special? Not good, special, because that's the standard Konami themselves created. When recent epic strikers arrive with ridiculous pay-to-win skills, unique animations and abilities that completely change matches, simply being a clinical finisher doesn't stand out anymore. Van Basten feels like the type of card that would have terrified everyone a couple of years ago. But today he struggles to separate himself from the crowd. He's another victim of the current power curve. By the time I got to Wesley Sneijder, I was honestly hoping Konami would finally surprise me. One of those cards where you look at the stats and immediately think, okay, this changes everything. And to be fair, Sneijder probably comes the closest to doing that. Not because he's overpowered, but because he actually knows exactly what he wants to be. This isn't a midfielder that's trying to do everything. He's a creator, a playmaker, someone who wants the ball at his feet every few seconds so he can dictate the tempo of the match. The technical ability on this card is honestly beautiful. 94 ball control, 96 tight possession, 95 lofted pass, 93 low pass, and an incredible 102 kicking power. That's the kind of midfielder that can switch play with one pass, split an entire defense open without even trying, and score screamers from 30 yards if you give him just a second of space. If you're somebody that enjoys building attacks patiently instead of rushing every possession, Sneijder is probably going to be your favorite player in this treasure link. But the same issue appears again. 82 speed and 85 acceleration. Every time I started liking one of these cards, I scrolled down to the athleticism section, and Konami reminded me that these weren't designed to dominate the current meta. They're almost as if Konami intentionally placed a speed limit on the entire collection. In today's game, where midfielders are expected to run from one box to the other for 90 minutes, those numbers immediately make you wonder whether he'll keep up against the likes of Bellingham, Valverde, and the newer box-to-box epics. Now, does that make Sneijder bad? Absolutely not. I actually think he's one of those cards that will age better than people expect because passing never really goes out of style. Pace can become outdated. Physicality can become outdated. Even finishing can become outdated when goalkeepers improve. But elite passing is always valuable. If you're someone who genuinely enjoys possession football instead of treating every attack like a sprint race, Sneijder is going to feel fantastic. The problem is that the current meta doesn't always reward that style of football. Then we arrive at the biggest human being in this entire treasure link, Koller. I'm convinced Konami looked at this card and said, forget pace, forget dribbling, let's just make him enormous. At 202 centimeters tall, Koller doesn't even look like he belongs on the same pitch as everyone else. He's basically a moving skyscraper. Give him a cross and he'll probably win it. Give him a corner and defenders are going to panic before the ball even leaves the crosser's foot. With 99 heading, 98 physical contact, and 96 finishing, he's built for one thing and one thing only: bullying defenders inside the penalty area. I can already picture somebody using Beckham or Sneijder to whip crosses into the box, while Koller just keeps scoring header after header. It honestly sounds hilarious, but then reality kicks in. 79 speed and 70 acceleration. The moment he has to chase a through ball, you're probably going to finish making a cup of tea before he reaches it. That's the trade-off. Konami has created one of the most dominant aerial strikers in the game, but they've made sure he's completely dependent on the way you play. If you're someone who loves crossing and traditional center forwards, you'll probably enjoy him a lot. If you're expecting him to run in behind like Eto'o or Mbappe, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And that's when I finally understood what was bothering me about this treasure link. It wasn't that the cards were weak. It wasn't that the stats were weak. It was that every single one of these players feels like they were designed for a completely different version of eFootball. Rio Ferdinand is elite defensively, but slower than modern center backs. Puyol is an unbelievable tackler, but lacks the recovery pace today's game demands. Basten is a phenomenal finisher, but doesn't have the explosiveness we've become used to. Sneijder is an incredible passer, but isn't built to sprint from box to box. Koller is arguably the best target man here, but only if you actually play like football existed before 2015. It's almost as if Konami intentionally ignored the current meta while designing these cards, and that's where I started forming a theory. What if these cards aren't outdated? What if they're actually giving us our first hint about eFootball 2027? Think about everything we've heard so far. Konami keeps talking about improving realism, making gameplay more authentic, and rewarding smarter football. If that's actually true, then maybe this constant obsession with speed is about to disappear. Maybe through ball spam won't be as effective anymore. Maybe possession football, patient build-up, and tactical positioning are about to become the new meta. If that happens, suddenly these treasure link cards start looking a lot more interesting. The problem is, right now, we simply don't know. Until the upcoming eFootball Connect finally reveals what's changing in eFootball 2027, all of this remains speculation. We can only judge these cards based on the game we have today, and based on today's meta, it's difficult to call this an amazing treasure link. It feels safe. It feels conservative. It feels like Konami deliberately avoided creating another broken set of free epics. So, after everything we've talked about, here's my final answer. At the end of the day, they're still free epic cards. Rio Ferdinand alone makes the grind worthwhile. Sneijder will fit perfectly into certain squads. Puyol will still frustrate attackers. Basten will always score goals. And Koller is going to be one of the funniest cards to use if you enjoy crossing. Maybe these cards are behind the current meta, or maybe they're actually ahead of the next one. We'll find out soon enough when eFootball Connect finally shows us what Konami has been cooking for eFootball 2027. Until then, I'd still say they're worth the grind. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.